Welcome to this week's episodes of Insights. And during this week's show, we're going to be discussing two particular topics. One of them is the hearings last week in The Hague in front of the International Court of Justice about the charges that were brought by Armenia against the Aliyev regime because of the war crimes that it committed in Artsakh. And the second part is going to be the very historic and little noticed visit of the Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar to Armenia last week. Let's go to the case that was being heard in The Hague last week. The hearing started on September 16th, and these cases that were brought by Armenia and the counterclaims by Azerbaijan were based on the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. So let's go through what, these are some of the things that Armenia, some of the cases that Armenia has brought against the Aliyev regime, not all of them, but let's just go over the most important ones. The first one is about the release of the illegally held POWs. As we know, we frankly don't know the exact number because Azerbaijan will not release the number. It could be a few hundred or it could be a few dozen Armenian prisoners of war or civilians that are being held in the dungeons of the Aliyev regime, which there's absolutely no justification for, given the fact that there was also a ceasefire agreement that demanded that all POWs must be released. So that's the thrust of the first point of the case that we brought against the Aliyev regime. The second one was to stop ethnic hate speech and to close the Nazi hate park that Aliyev had built in Baku with the mannequins of the very unattractive looking Armenian that was essentially right out of Nazi propaganda. What's interesting here is right before the case started, the Aliyev regime retreated and removed all the helmets of the deceased Armenian soldiers and the hate mannequins that they had put up, essentially conceding that they are actually violate this convention. The last one is about the third one, it's not the last one, is to stop destroying Armenian cultural property and provide Armenians access to their ancient churches, monasteries, and other historic sites. As we all know, since significant parts of Artsakh, specifically Shushi and Hadrut, have come under the control of the Aliyev regime, they have gone on an ISIS-style destruction campaign of all kinds of historic sites to wipe away any evidence of the Armenian history of these regions. Now, Azerbaijan has actually filed counterclaims to this, and let's go through them. Let's go over the primary ones. The first one is they are saying that the fact that there are landmines still left in Artsakh and the territories around it, which were placed before the war, is some kind of a discriminatory measure, which is absurd on the face of it, because landmines kill everyone equally. It doesn't matter if you're an Armenian, you're an Iranian, you're an Argentine, or one of Aliyev's subjects, you can all die from the same landmine. So obviously, setting landmines is not designed to be something that forwards or advances racial discrimination or hatred. Their second point is to demand that the Armenian government stop people spewing hate on Twitter and to shut down organizations like VOMA, which is a simple, self-defense education organization, which again, if you're demanding that countries shut down all of its citizens' tweets, that's a standard that no country will ever be able to meet. So this tells you about the weaknesses of their case when we're talking about POWs, the destruction of cultural monuments, and the systematic hatred that has become part and parcel of the culture of the Aliyev regime, and you compare it with the silly countercharges that we have seen. Before I wrap up about what is really important in this case, let me just tell you about how this process works. The court heard the hearings for about 3 days last week, and they are slated to actually give their verdict in a month. So the initial verdict is going to be rather prompt, and obviously when that comes, we'll talk about it. But obviously, whenever you go to court in a matter like this, it's not simply what happens in court. It's also the public relations or the politics that comes out of it. And unless the court entirely shuts down our case, or rejects our case, which is not very likely, we have already won. And I'll give you the perfect example is the fact that they conceded to remove the helmets and the fascist mannequins from that park. So we've already made our point as far as who's doing what for what reason. But what is the multiple lessons we can learn from this? And I think, and there's a lot to learn from this, and I really commend the people that are bringing these cases, and we should actually do a lot more of them, is the first lesson is when you fight, good things happen. We need to constantly challenge when our rights are being violated and constantly be in the face of this horrid regime in Baku. Because when you put them in front of the court of public opinion, they more often than not lose. What should be our plan? Our plan should be that make every war crime that happened last year and is still happening today a public issue. We must make every attempt to make every war criminal, whether they come from the Turkish military or from Aliyev's military, into public outcasts and out them. We have to make sure that every violation of our rights is known by the world. Let's not forget that everyone who does evil hates the light. Our job is to bring light and the attention of the world on these atrocities. But philosophically, when you really look at it, what all of these efforts are about is about putting a cost on Armenian lives. What we learned last year is that our lives have no value to the world. Our job, by actions like this, and far more actions like this, both on the public relations front and the legal front, is to make sure that people understand that if you violate our rights, if you kill our citizens, there is a price to be paid. And if we'll need to chase you to the gates of hell, we will do so to make sure that you pay a price for violating our rights. Let's move on to the second topic of the week, which is the historic visit of the Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar to Armenia last week. Now, I think people have still these stereotypical images of India as, dance music or, movies or basic cultural things. Well, in fact, India is really the second most important country in Asia in what is apt to be the Asian century, the century that we're living in right now. So the fact that this is the first time an Indian foreign minister has made a visit to Armenia is actually an embarrassment to our foreign policy. This is something that should have happened a long time ago. What we're seeing here is a couple of things, and it's not just Armenia that's interested in India, it's also India that's interested in Armenia. And I think we need to take these and run with it as far as opportunities. There's obviously a correlation of interest in this case, especially in building the north-south highway between Armenia, India, Iran, and the EU, which are all interested in this. The Indians are building this giant port facility in Iran, in Charbahar, which is on the Gulf of Oman, that will essentially allow them to export their products via Iran, through Armenia, into Georgia, to go to Europe, or through Georgia to go to Russia. The other point of interest that has pulled the Pakistanis here, the Indians here, is the presence of the political and military presence of Pakistan. As we know, there is the local axis of evil between Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Pakistan has been involved in the war games that were happening near the Iranian border. So I think this has drawn the interest of the Indian government. Let's talk about what our task is here. Obviously, India is a world giant and we're a minnow. It is not their job to pursue or push this relationship. It is our job to push this relationship. And I think there's four things that I think we need to look at. The first one is a military relationship. I think there are a lot of areas that we can cooperate with them, buying weapons, building weapons, selling weapons, hopefully on the long run to each other. And this is something that we need to push and be very proactive about. The second one, which is a natural, is the trade relationship. There's actually a lot of places where our economies match, especially in the tech world. And now in labor, as everyone knows, there are significant numbers of Indians now who work in everything from agriculture to tech to fill in the needs of our industries, which the local labor market cannot meet. So it's military, then it's trade. And the third one is political. I think we need to make a very clear political alliances on things that are important to India, whether it's Kashmir, whether it's fighting terrorism, whether it's being strongly against Pakistan. We have absolutely no reason not to be strongly pro-Indian in any of these disputes. And I think the BJP party, which is the dominant party in India, and it's essentially a Hindu nationalist party, is a political force that I think we can have great affinity with in the long term on the interests that we're interested in. Lastly, I think, and this is key, this could be a test case for what I call the politics of the periphery. It is no secret that since the war, Armenia's foreign policy options have been greatly limited. It's very hard for us to do anything that contradicts Russian interests in our region, just because of the security needs that we have in Artsakh and in Armenia itself. But obviously, the further you get away from this region, the less relevant or the less likely there is to be Russian interference in any of these relationships. And I think India and other countries like it, whether it's Egypt, Ethiopia, South Africa, or some countries in South America, are places where we can actually extend our influence politically, economically, and cooperate militarily in certain cases, and to sort of set a test case of places where we can have relationships that which are essentially world powers without causing any specific diplomatic problems locally with our most important political and military partner, which is Russia. Thank you for joining me in this week's edition of Insights.